On August 30, 1984, sisters Sherri and Beth went to the police with a statement about the disappearance of their mother, Mary Badaracco. The 38-year-old woman has not contacted for 10 days. Her husband said that she left home because they decided to divorce. But the sisters were sure that in this situation, their mother would first of all go to one of them. But since this didn't happen, they suspected the worst. So where did Mary Badaracco go? Did she run away from her husband to build a new life, or someone helped her disappear? Let's figure it out. Mary Edna Pissarro was born on August 11, 1946. She grew up with 11 siblings. Parents tried to provide the family with everything necessary, so they spent most of their time at work. Children were mostly left to their own devices. Mary Edna grew up a lively, cheerful and very active girl. She could always stand up for herself and her loved ones, if necessary. Mary had a creative talent. She was very good at drawing. She carried this passion into adulthood. It cannot be said that the Pissarro family was dysfunctional, but for some reason Mary dreamed of leaving her home as soon as possible. Therefore, already at the age of 16, without even having time to finish school, she got married. Family life didn't last long, but during this time the couple had 2 daughters, Sherri and Beth. After the divorce, Mary Edna was forced to move frequently with her children. Due to the lack of education, she could not get a good, well-paid job, so she mostly worked as a cleaner or waitress. In 1970, 24-year-old Mary and her daughters moved to Sherman, Connecticut, where she got a job at the Three Kings Bar. Its owner was 34-year-old Dominic Badaracco. He really liked the cheerful and sociable girl. He began to show signs of attention to her. The 10-year age difference didn't bother Mary at all, so a relationship quickly began between them and they soon got married. Mary and the girls moved into Dominic's house. He had 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. Children periodically lived in the father's house. Mary tried to get along with Dominic's children, and got along pretty well with them. But he, in turn, was not at all interested in Sherri and Beth. He was not going to become a stepfather for them. When talking to Mary, Dominic always referred to her girls as your children. Since Mary moved in with Dominic, their relationship gradually began to deteriorate. From an attentive, kind and charming man, he turned into a despot who completely controlled his wife. She literally had to chastise for every step. Dominic was a fairly successful businessman. He owned 2 bars and a firm that was engaged in repair and construction work. There was more than enough money to ensure a comfortable life even for such a large family. But Dominic was very stingy. He saved on everything, including his own children, not to mention his stepdaughters. He allocated a certain amount of money for monthly payments and products. Mary was obliged to buy only what her husband would say, although she also earned by continuing to work in a bar. Sherri and Beth reminisce about their childhood with horror. Dominic behaved very imperiously and cruelly. He constantly commanded and was dissatisfied with everything. He treated not only Mary's children badly, but also his own. For each disobedience, Dominic physically punished the children. For minor offenses, he beat them with a belt, and for large ones, with a wooden device that looked like an paddle. The names of all the children were written on it. After punishing the child near his name, Dominic made another notch. There were often loud quarrels in the Badaracco house, turning into a fight. Everyone who was nearby fell under the distribution. The reason for these scandals was most often associated with the jealousy of Dominic. He believed that his wife was cheating on him, although without his knowledge she could not take a step. But Dominic himself was convicted of treason more than once. Mary knew about several of his mistresses, but if she tried to show it to her husband, then he beat her. Every time a scandal was brewing, Mary ran away with the children to the neighbors or hid with them somewhere in the district. One of the neighbors said that Mary and her daughters came running to him even in the middle of the night. But wherever they were hiding, Dominic always found them and forced them to return to the house. The woman often walked with bruises. All the neighbors and friends of the family knew what was going on, but no one intervened. Mary called the police several times and filed a complaint against her husband about the beatings, But this didn't lead to anything. The maximum that the police did was to issue a fine. As it turned out later, he had good connections with the right people, so he got away with a lot. Due to regular beatings and betrayals, Mary left her husband several times. But for some reason she always returned. Her daughters still cannot understand why she did it. Perhaps Dominic threatened her with something. Or a broken woman simply didn't want to return to her former, poor life. After all, despite all the horrors that were happening in the Badaracco house, Mary and her daughters had at least some stability. She was sure that the girls would receive an education and be able to provide themselves with a comfortable life. In 1984, Dominique and Mary moved into a new house. By that time, the children had already grown up and lived their own lives. Sherri, who was 21 at the time, was engaged, and Beth was 20 and had recently given birth to her first child. Mary hoped that in the new house her relationship with her husband would improve. Now they will live only together and will be able to devote more time to each other. Unfortunately, bright hopes were in vain. 6 months later, Mary found out that Dominic was having another affair. This time, she was determined to get a divorce, and informed her daughters about it. Before telling Dominic about her intentions, Mary consulted a lawyer about the divorce. Later, a serious conversation took place between the spouses. Dominic denied having a mistress, even though Mary had overwhelming evidence. She requested a divorce. Despite the fact that the conversation was held in a raised tone, it didn't end in beatings, as before. Dominic seemed to agree with his wife's decision. The next few days passed quietly. Mary quit her job and was looking for a new place to live. But the long-awaited divorce didn't take place. She just disappeared. Sherri and Beth last spoke to their mother on the phone on August 19th. They didn't call each other every day, so they had no idea what was going on in the Badaracco house during the following days. On August 23rd, Dominic's daughter Donna called Sherri and asked her to come to her parents' house. She said that her stepfather wanted to talk to her. Sherri thought it was about the upcoming wedding, and she was very surprised that her mother herself didn't call her. The next day, right after work, Sherri went to Badaracco's house. Usually Mary always met her daughter, but this time no one came out. Sherri parked the car outside the house and walked to the front door. In the driveway was her mother's car, a 1982 Chevrolet Cavalier. Sherri saw that the windshield on the driver's side had been shattered and the pieces lay on the seat. When she entered the house, she saw Dominic and the first thing she asked about her mother. To which he dryly replied, "Your mother left me." He said that on August 19th they discussed their relationship and decided to get a divorce. And the next day, while he was at work, Mary packed her things, took the $100,000 that was hidden in the house, and left. Mary left her car keys and wedding ring on the kitchen table. Dominic convinced Sherri that for the time being, no one needed to be told about this, not the police, not Sister Beth. He added that his lawyer will deal with everything. Sherri was shocked by this information, but didn't ask her stepfather about what had happened. She decided to wait for news from her mother. Dominic asked his stepdaughter to pick up Mary's remaining belongings. But, as it turned out, there was practically nothing to take away. All that's left is a few bottles of leftover perfume and art supplies. Sherri was worried. Her mother was very fond of drawing, so when she moved, she would definitely take with her everything related to her hobby. Sherri also noticed that there were no photographs of her mother left in the house. They were taken out of the frames. Interior items that were somehow connected with Mary also disappeared. This became another wake-up call. Mary had nowhere to go but to her daughters. So where could she go with a huge amount of things, and even without a car? 10 days passed, but there was still no news from Mary. Sherri could no longer be silent. She told her sister everything. And they decided to go to the police. They insisted that Dominic might be involved in their mother's disappearance, so the detectives went to Badaracco's house to talk to Dominic. He told the police that he and his wife had decided to get a divorce, but he described their breakup a little differently than he told his stepdaughter. Dominic claimed that on August 20th he personally gave his wife $100,000 in compensation so that she would not claim his property and sign the relevant papers. After that, Mary packed her things and left in a taxi, leaving her wedding ring and the keys to her car. On August 28, the man filed for divorce. Dominic showed the detectives a Chevrolet with a broken windshield that was parked in the driveway. He admitted that he himself broke it during the last quarrel with his wife. The detectives didn't examine it, they believed in Dominic's story, and didn't start a criminal case. Sherri and Beth were shocked by the inaction of the police. They knew something terrible had happened to their mother. She couldn't just disappear. The sisters kept insisting that Dominic might be involved. Therefore, a few days later, the detectives again visited Badaracco's house, but he was not there. In his house now lived a young woman named Joan and her 2 children. Contact with Dominic was possible only by phone. He said that he went to visit his sister in another state, and rented out his house. The police asked him to take a polygraph test, but he refused. He said that he was too upset about the separation from his wife, and didn't intend to return to Connecticut yet. Along with Dominic's departure, Mary's car was also missing. There were no documents on the sale or transfer to the use of third parties. Neighbors said that they didn't see the car leaving somewhere. It just disappeared, like Mary. Strange that the police didn't search Badaracco's house. This was done only after 28 years. Also, an examination of Mary's car was not appointed, and the investigation didn't insist on checking the veracity of Dominic's words on a polygraph. Maybe it had to do with who Dominic really was. Everything he had was obtained by dishonest labor. In fact, he squeezed companies from businessmen through threats and intimidation. With those who were stubborn or interfered with his activities, Badaracco acted more radically. People simply disappeared, and the police were in no hurry to look for them. Dominic never acted directly. All the dirty work was done by the Hells Angels motorcycle gang. It included the son of Dominic, Joseph. He was brought to criminal responsibility several times due to arson, threats and bodily harm. The inaction of the police could only speak of one thing: Dominic had a huge impact on it. Nobody wanted to get involved with him. Sherri and Beth stopped hoping for help from local authorities, so they began to turn to the leadership of the state. What was Dominic doing at that time? Enjoyed life. A year after Mary's disappearance, he received a divorce. As neither she nor her representative appeared in court, the decision was made unilaterally. After the official divorce, Dominic got married again. His wife was the same Joan who allegedly rented the Badaracco house. As it turned out later, she was Dominic's mistress, whom Mary found out about shortly before her disappearance. The case moved forward only after 6 years. In 1990, Sherri and Beth received support from State Representative Lynn Tabersake. It was thanks to her that the police finally began to act. Detectives began to gather information about Mary's life. So they found out that she had repeatedly written statements against her husband because of the beatings. Found out details about the black activities of Badaracco and the Hells Angels gang. Dominic became the prime suspect. The more details the investigation found out, the more threats Lynn Tabersake received. Including from one of the sons of Dominic. He told Lynn to mind her own business and stay out of the way. After that, Lynn was even more convinced that she was on the right track. In 1991, a former member of the Hells Angels gang entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. He told the police that Mary was killed at the request of Dominic Badaracco. The performers were members of the same gang, but he didn't name them. By that time, the police already knew that Dominic's son, Joseph, was in it, so the detectives decided to talk to him first. Joseph has been in prison since 1989. He, along with accomplice Steve Kendall, blew up the bar. Its owner was one of Dominic's main competitors. Joseph flatly refused to communicate with the detectives. He said that neither he nor his family was involved in Mary's disappearance, and he would like to know what happened to her. Then the detectives decided to interrogate Steve. He also refused to be interviewed, but after some time he agreed to take a polygraph test. The guy claimed that he had never seen Mary and didn't know if she could have been killed by one of the gang members. But the polygraph showed that Steve was lying when answering these questions. Later, under strange circumstances, he died in a car accident. Despite the fact that the police had no evidence, they reclassified Mary's case as a premeditated murder. It would seem that the investigation should finally get off the ground, but the police were in no hurry to launch a full-scale search. Sherri and Beth continued to search for their mother on their own. They wanted this case to get as much publicity as possible, so they were guests on various TV shows. The sisters made every effort, and in a moment of despair even turned to psychics. In 2003, a ray of hope appeared to unravel the mystery of the disappearance of Mary Badaracco. A man named Lee Jupina contacted the police. He said that he was relaxing with the company in Abe's bar, around the time that Mary disappeared. An acquaintance named Ernest Dockenhausen boasted that Dominic Badaracco had given him the important task of burying a car in one of his properties. Ernest had several houses in different cities. He was engaged in digging pits for developments, so Dominic often hired him for that work. But sometimes, for a good pay, Ernest performed tasks of a different plan. The police called Ernest in for questioning. Of course, he denied everything, and said that the police were wasting their time. But the detectives didn't back down. They got a warrant to search Ernest's property. What was their surprise when they dug up 3 cars in different areas. One car was the same make that Mary drove, a Chevrolet Cavalier, but it was blue, and Mary's was black. After conducting an examination, the police confirmed that these were different cars. Although Ernest was not involved in the disappearance of Mary, he tried to interfere with the investigation of this case. Therefore, in 2008 he was charged with providing false and misleading information. The police also felt that after the arrest they could get more information from Ernest in exchange for a commuted sentence. But, as it turned out, he had nothing to say. Even about the dug-up cars, since they belonged to him. In 2009, charges were dropped against Ernest. In 2010, a grand jury investigation was launched into Mary's case, which was held in the Supreme Court in New Britain. Such hearings are held in secret, and little is known about the process. As a rule, a grand jury considers a case when there is no other way to find out whether a crime was committed, and also, if there is a suspicion of political corruption. The grand jury calls witnesses to gather information. They have the right to come with lawyers. When considering the case of Mary Badaracco, 62 witnesses were involved. Judge Robert Bernetti was supposed to be part of the grand jury, but shortly before the start of the hearing, he refused, and later resigned. Robert admitted that he foolishly told some of the details of Mary's case to his friend Ronald Richter, who, as it turned out, was a longtime business partner of Dominic Badaracco. Robert also knew Dominic. They sometimes played golf together. Dominic decided to bribe Robert by offering him $100,000. But he didn't do it directly, but through Ronald. This act further convinced the investigation that Dominic was involved in the disappearance of Mary. In June 2013, he was charged with trying to bribe one of the grand jury members. There was no direct evidence. The detective suggested to Robert that he contacted Dominic and agreed to a deal, offering to discuss everything in person. Dominic began to hesitate. He agreed several times, then refused to meet. In the end, it never took place. Then the detectives decided to check the bank accounts of the suspect. It turned out that just 2 days before Dominic offered the judge a bribe, he closed one of his accounts for $126,000. This became circumstantial evidence. Dominic didn't comment on this. As a result, he received 7 years in prison. But he served only half of his sentence, and was released at the age of 79. The Supreme Court was unable to find any evidence that Dominic was involved in his wife's disappearance. But Mary's daughters were not going to stop. They hired a new lawyer, Michelle Cruz. She found in the case a lot of offenses that the investigation allowed, and began to understand them. When Michelle tried to reveal the details of the grand jury investigation and began asking uncomfortable questions, she was suddenly fired from her position as an injured party's lawyer and her license was revoked. Over time, Michelle was able to restore her license, and began to conduct a private legal practice. It's been 38 years since Mary Badaracco disappeared without a trace. Unfortunately, no new details have emerged in her case. But her daughters Sherri and Beth still hope to learn at least some information about their mother. They are ready to pay $50,000 to anyone who will help in the investigation.